Imagine waking up one day and discovering that your body is becoming a prison.
Your muscles, your tendons, evading slowly transforming into bone.
A wrong move could trigger an irreversible process where your body begins to fossilize while you're still alive.
Sounds like a nightmare?
Well, for some people, this is the brutal reality of Fibrodysplasia Ossificans Progressiva, an extremely rare condition that condemns its sufferers to a true progressive immobilization. How does this happen? Is there a cure? And the scariest question, could we be facing a hidden secret of human evolution? Stay with me until the end to find out. But before we continue, hit the like button and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the most shocking cases in the world. Now get ready, because this story will leave you speechless. Everything seemed normal in Lucas's life, until a simple fall while playing soccer changed his life forever. A small accident, a simple wrong move, but the pain he felt was far from ordinary. His knee swelled in a strange way, and in the following weeks, he began to experience difficulty moving, as if something was hardening inside his body. Initially, doctors thought it was just a regular injury, but what happened next was something no one could have predicted. The symptoms began to spread. The stiffness didn't go away. On the contrary, it seemed to get worse. His muscles started becoming more tense, as if they were calcifying. No matter how hard he tried to move, Lucas's body seemed no longer to obey.
What was happening?
He didn't know, but something was clearly wrong. And this is just the tip of the iceberg of one of the rarest and most terrifying diseases medicine has ever known, Fibrodysplasia Ossificans Progressiva, where a person's bones begin to grow uncontrollably, turning their muscles into stone. How did Lucas discover this in such a shocking way? Let's find out now. After weeks of tests and visits to various specialists, Lucas finally received the diagnosis. At first, he thought it was just another common muscle injury, something that could be treated with physical therapy and rest. But when the doctor looked him in the eyes with a serious expression, Lucas realized something was wrong. "Lucas, what you have is not a simple injury," the doctor said in a serious voice. "You have an extremely rare condition called Fibrodysplasia Ossificans Progressiva. Your bones are turning into bones, even in your muscles and tendons. There is no cure for this." Those words echoed in Lucas's mind, but he couldn't fully understand what it meant. What did he mean by your bones turning into bones? He thought the situation was serious, but he still didn't comprehend the magnitude of what was to come. FOP was a prison sentence for his body. Gradually, his muscles, ligaments, and tendons would be replaced by bone, restricting his movements until he became completely immobilized. He would no longer be able to move freely, and over time, his joints would become stiff and painful. The devastating news was followed by a deafening silence. The doctor explained that, in addition to the impossibility of a cure, the existing treatments were limited to trying to alleviate the pain and slow the progression of the disease. The impact was overwhelming. Lucas, who had once led an active life full of plans, now faced an uncertain and distressing future. The reality of his illness had become a nightmare no one could wake up from. As the weeks went by, Lucas began to feel the first visible effects of Fibrodysplasia Ossificans Progressiva. His muscles, once flexible and strong, started to become stiff. At first, it seemed like something simple, like a muscle strain. But soon, he realized the pain wouldn't go away, and the stiffness increased every day. Lucas's movements became more and more limited. Something strange was happening inside his body. His muscles began to turn into bone, as if they were calcifying uncontrollably. What was once a flexible and functional joint was now becoming a true prison of bones. The pain was no longer just a fleeting sensation. It was constant, excruciating, as if his own joints were hardening with every movement. He could no longer bend like before, nor perform simple tasks like tying his shoes or raising his arms above his head. The worst part was that this transformation had no set stopping point. Every part of Lucas's body was being taken over by an irreversible process, where muscles were being replaced by bones, creating a rigidity that made any movement a torture.
The fear of moving intensified.
He knew that the more he moved, the faster the disease would progress. Every movement seemed like a cruel reminder that his body was becoming a prison. The doctors warned that in more advanced stages, even his ability to breathe could be compromised as the bones spread to his rib cage, restricting his lungs. There was no escape. He was being imprisoned by his own body, and the only thing left was to try to live as much as possible before becoming completely immobilized. Lucas found himself in a constant battle against his own body. What was once natural now seemed impossible. And as the bones took over his joints and muscles, he couldn't help but wonder, how long will I be able to move?
How long will ich still be müsig?
Every day, Lucas found himself becoming more limited. But at the same time, one question became more and more urgent in his mind. Is there any hope? Would it be possible to reverse what was happening to his body, or at least slow the progression of the disease? In search of answers, he began to delve deeper into research on Fibrodysplasia Ossificans Progressiva. The diagnosis was clear, a rare and incurable disease that caused bones to grow uncontrollably, but science was far from accepting this sentence without a fight. Researchers around the world were slowly starting to understand FOP better. Some scientists were studying how genetic mutations caused extra bones to form in soft tissues, a natural process but misinterpreted in other conditions. The question everyone was asking was, how can we stop this from happening? There were some treatment attempts, though all with limited results. Medications that could reduce pain, but not prevent the formation of extra bones. In some cases, attempts to block the protein responsible for abnormal ossification were being tested. But these alternatives were experimental and offered no cure, only temporary relief for the symptoms. The real solution was still far away. Science was making progress, but it was still much behind what Lucas needed. To him, time seemed scarce, and the only thing he could do was rely on the ongoing studies, hoping that at some point, something would emerge that could truly change his situation. But while scientists raced against time, Lucas also found himself dealing with his own personal battle. How could he live a full life knowing the future would inevitably be limited? Science was doing what it could, but the reality of his disease was relentless and ever-present. Lucas, like so many others with FOP, knew deep down that the cure was far off, and the most he could do was try to survive, day by day, until something new appeared on the horizon of medicine. And the question that lingered in the air was, would Lucas see the long-awaited hope before his body completely transformed? As Lucas struggled to understand and cope with his own condition, he discovered an even more terrifying story that shook his hopes and strengthened his desire to fight. In the United Kingdom, there was the case of Harry Eastlack, a man whose story is considered one of the most extreme and moving cases of Fibrodysplasia Ossificans Progressiva. Harry was diagnosed with FOP in childhood, but it wasn't until his teenage years that the symptoms began to manifest more aggressively. By the age of 25, he was completely immobilized, with his body virtually fossilized. What shocked doctors and researchers the most was the speed at which the disease progressed in Harry, transforming his muscles and tendons into bone at a dizzying pace. But what made his story even more remarkable was the way he faced the situation. Despite seeing his freedom of movement taken away, he remained active in his struggle, trying to live as much as possible before becoming fully immobilized. And paradoxically, it was his premature death at the age of 39 that brought about an important scientific discovery. During the course of his illness, Harry was able to reveal new details about the behavior of FOP. His body, which had become a true bone prison, was studied by doctors and scientists after his death. The discovery was shocking. Harry's bones were considered one of the rarest examples of progressive ossification ever documented. Researchers used his body to understand how the disease evolves, and although there was no cure in his lifetime, his story opened doors to scientific advancements that could help future generations. But while Harry became a case study, Lucas's reality grew even darker. Would he too be consumed by this hopeless condition? Harry's story, although inspiring in its courage, also revealed a dark and uncontrollable side of FOP. And for Lucas, this example was not only a warning but also a cruel reminder that his struggle was just beginning. The question that hovered over him was, would he have the same courage to face what Harry faced, or would his story take an even more tragic turn? As Lucas delved deeper into his journey to understand Fibrodysplasia Ossificans Progressiva, one inevitable question emerged in his mind: can this happen to anyone? The answer was not simple, and it brought a frightening truth he wasn't prepared to face. Fibrodysplasia Ossificans Progressiva is a rare genetic disease caused by a mutation in the ACVR1 gene, which affects bone and muscle tissue formation. What's most terrifying is that this mutation can occur spontaneously in a person, even without a family history of the disease. In other words, anyone can develop FOP without warning. Although the defective gene is passed from parents to children, in some cases, the mutation can occur spontaneously, with no prior warning in the family. This means that even someone with no family history of the disease can find themselves facing the same relentless fate that Lucas and other FOP sufferers face. Furthermore, FOP is progressive, which means it worsens over time. There's no way to predict how quickly the disease will progress, making it even more terrifying that it can develop at any stage of life. In some cases, the first symptoms appear in childhood, while in others, the progression only begins in adulthood. And while doctors can diagnose the condition with imaging tests, there's no definitive way to stop the ossification from continuing. But what about prevention? Unfortunately, FOP cannot be prevented. There's no way to stop the genetic mutation before it happens. The only way to know if someone is genetically predisposed is through genetic testing, but many FOP sufferers don't have this option, as the diagnosis often comes only after the symptoms begin. The real question that emerged was, if this can happen to anyone, are we truly prepared for what the future holds? The uncertainty of such a rare but possible disease brings forth a sense of vulnerability that we all try to avoid. For Lucas, the idea that anyone could one day face the same condition he was living with brought a mix of fear and frustration. If medicine still didn't have an answer for his own struggle, how could it provide an answer for so many others who, like him, were at the mercy of fate? And the final question, still echoing in his mind, what else beyond FOP could genetics be hiding from us? Time passed, and Lucas faced the reality of Fibrodysplasia Ossificans Progressiva with a courage that many would consider unimaginable. As his bones grew increasingly stiff, he clung to the hope that science would one day bring a solution, or at least a way to slow down the process. But as the days went by, he realized that the true challenge wasn't just the disease, but how to live with it. For a moment, Lucas considered the possibility that the future would bring him a completely immobilized life, where every movement would be impossible, where he would become a living statue, like so many other FOP sufferers. However, he didn't allow this to consume him. He began to redefine what living meant to him. He focused on simple and important moments, being with family, talking to friends, traveling while he still could, and enjoying the small pleasures of life that so many took for granted. But the most surprising thing happened when Lucas, in one last attempt to seek a scientific breakthrough, participated in an innovative study testing a new experimental treatment. Although the results weren't a cure, they brought something unexpected, a new hope. The study showed that, although FOP was incurable, the progression of the disease could be significantly slowed with the use of specific medications and genetic therapies, giving Lucas and other patients precious time to live with better quality. Instead of passively accepting his fate, Lucas became part of a community of people who, like him, were fighting against time. Together, they became advocates for research, encouraging more studies and fighting for advances in the treatment of FOP. Although the cure was still far away, the simple fact that science had taken a step forward brought Lucas a renewed sense of purpose. He might not be able to stop the progression of the disease, but he could still fight to ensure that others wouldn't have to face the same hopeless sentence. And so Lucas's story, which began as a tale of despair and helplessness, ended on a note of courage, unity, and struggle. He had discovered that true strength wasn't in defeating the disease, but in living well with it. Sometimes, the ending no one expects isn't the end, but a new beginning. If you were moved by Lucas's story, leave a like and subscribe to the channel to follow more inspiring stories and learn more about rare diseases that challenge science.